The sound of private jets and crystal glassware was all he ever knew, until the day he decided to leave it all behind for a life of rust and rain. Imagine standing in a boardroom overlooking Manhattan one day, and then waking up on a thin floor mat in a crowded coastal village the next, where the smell of salt air and charcoal smoke replaces the scent of expensive cologne. Most people spend their entire lives trying to escape poverty, but this man had a different mission that no one in his inner circle could understand or support. He arrived in the Philippines with nothing but a worn-out backpack and a story about being a traveling student looking for a simple place to stay. What he found in the narrow alleys of a vibrant community was something that billions of dollars could never buy, and a secret that threatened to destroy the very connection he was trying to build. His journey began in the high-stakes world of Silicon Valley, where every second is measured in profit margins, and every relationship is often a transaction in disguise. Despite his massive wealth, he felt a profound sense of isolation that grew louder with every zero added to his bank balance. He realized that everyone he met saw the dollar signs before they saw the man, and he desperately craved a reality where he could be judged by his character rather than his net worth. The Philippines was a deliberate choice because of its reputation for hospitality and the deep cultural emphasis on family and community over material success. He chose a small province far from the luxury resorts of Boracay or the glass towers of Makati, seeking a place where he could truly disappear into the crowd. Landing in Manila was the first shock to his system as the tropical heat and the chaotic energy of the city pressed against him like a physical weight. He traded his designer suit for a $5 shirt from a local market and boarded a crowded bus headed south toward the provinces. For the first time in a decade, he was just another face in the crowd, ignored by the world and invisible to the paparazzi. The transition was brutal, as he had to learn how to navigate a world without a personal assistant or a GPS to guide his every move. He finally arrived at a small fishing village where the houses were built on stilts and the children played with wooden hoops in the dirt. He found a small room for rent in a house shared by a local family who treated him with a kindness that felt both alien and overwhelming. They didn't ask for his credentials or his financial history. They simply offered him a plate of fried fish and a spot at their table. He told them he was a writer on a tight budget, trying to see the world before settling down, which was a lie that tasted bitter in his mouth. Living in such close quarters meant he had to hide his expensive watch in the lining of his bag and pretend to struggle with the basic costs of daily life. This deception was necessary to protect his experiment, but it also created a wall between him and the very people he was starting to admire. The first few weeks were a lesson in humility as he struggled with the lack of air conditioning and the constant noise of the village life. He spent his days helping the local fishermen pull in their nets and learning how to cook rice over an open flame, which were skills he never thought he would need. In the evenings, he would sit on the porch and listen to the stories of the elders who spoke of resilience and the importance of looking out for one's neighbor. He began to realize that these people were far richer in spirit than the associates he left behind in the United States. It was during one of these community gatherings that he first locked eyes with a woman named Maria, who worked as a teacher at the local elementary school. Maria was a force of nature, with a smile that seemed to light up the entire street, even on the gloomiest rainy days. She was dedicated to her students and spent her meager salary buying books and supplies for the children who had the least. He found himself drawn to her passion and her refusal to be defined by the limitations of her environment. They started spending time together, walking along the shore at sunset and discussing everything from philosophy to the simple joys of a good meal. She liked him because he listened with intent and seemed genuinely interested in her dreams for the community. He liked her because she was the first person in years who didn't want anything from him other than his company. As their bond deepened, the weight of his secret began to feel like a lead weight in his chest every time they spoke. He saw her struggling to fix the roof of the school, and he knew he could write a check that would build 100 schools without even noticing the loss. However, he knew that if he revealed his identity, he would ruin the purity of the connection they had built over the past few months. He had to stand by and watch her work 3 jobs just to support her younger siblings, while he had millions sitting idle in a bank account across the ocean. The guilt of his charade started to keep him awake at night, wondering if she would ever forgive him for the massive lie he was living.
Their relationship reached a turning point during a local festival where the entire village came together to celebrate the harvest. Under the glow of paper lanterns, he realized he was falling deeply in love with a woman who thought he was as broke as she was. He saw the way she looked at him with such trust and admiration, and it broke his heart to know he was playing a character. He decided that he couldn't keep the secret forever, but he needed to find the right moment to tell her the truth without losing her. He started to drop subtle hints about having a life back home that was more complicated than he let on, but she brushed it off as him being modest about his past.
Disaster struck when a tropical storm hit the region, causing widespread damage to the village and destroying many of the homes, including the school where Maria worked. The devastation was heartbreaking, and the billionaire watched as the people he had grown to love lost everything they worked so hard to build. He saw Maria crying over the ruined books and the collapsed walls of her classroom, and he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. The urge to help was no longer a philosophical experiment, but a desperate need to protect the woman he loved. He slipped away to the nearest city, where he could find a stable internet connection, and began making calls that would change the village forever. He coordinated with his foundation back in the States to send emergency supplies and funding under the guise of an anonymous international donor. He made sure the aid arrived quickly, but he stayed in the background to avoid drawing attention to himself. Watching the relief on the faces of his neighbors as trucks filled with food and building materials arrived was the most rewarding moment of his life. Maria was at the forefront of the recovery efforts, working tirelessly to organize the distribution of supplies to the families who needed them most. Even in the midst of the chaos, she remained his anchor, reminding him why he had come to this place in the beginning. As the village began to rebuild, he knew the time had come to sit Maria down and explain exactly who he was. He took her to their favorite spot on the beach, where the debris had been cleared and the ocean looked calm once again. He started by telling her about his life in the city and the hollow feeling of having everything, but nothing at all. He watched her expression shift from confusion to shock as he revealed the scale of his wealth and the fact that he was the one behind the recent donations. The silence that followed was the longest and most terrifying minute of his entire life as he waited for her reaction. Maria didn't jump for joy at the news of his billions. Instead, she felt a profound sense of betrayal that he had hidden his true self for so long. She questioned if any of their moments together were real, or if she was just a part of some elaborate game he was playing with his life. He pleaded with her to understand that he only hid the truth because he wanted to be loved for who he was and not for his money. It took weeks of difficult conversations and tearful explanations for her to begin to see past the wealth and remember the man who helped the fisherman and listened to her dreams. He had to prove that his love was the only thing that wasn't a facade during his stay in the village. Eventually, she realized that his actions during the storm were not about power, but about genuine care for the community she loved. She saw that he was willing to give up his anonymity to save the people who had welcomed him when he had nothing. They decided to bridge their two worlds together, using his resources to create sustainable development projects that empowered the local people without stripping them of their culture. He didn't take her away to a high-rise in New York. Instead, they built a home in the village that served as a center for education and health. He found that the secret to happiness wasn't about the amount of money in his pocket, but the depth of the roots he planted.
Their story became a legend in the province, a tale of a man who traveled across the world to find a home he never knew he was missing. The billionaire who once lived in a bubble of luxury now spent his days in the sun, working alongside the people he once observed from a distance. He learned that wealth is a tool that can either build walls or bridges, and he chose to spend the rest of his life building bridges. Maria remained his partner in every sense of the word, keeping him grounded and reminding him of the value of a simple life. The man who pretended to be poor ended up being the richest man in the world because he finally had a heart that was full. This experience changed his perspective on success entirely, as he realized that the most valuable things in life are often the ones we take for granted. He stopped measuring his worth by his stock portfolio and started measuring it by the lives he touched and the love he shared. The Philippines wasn't just a destination on a map for him. It was the place where he finally woke up and started living a life of purpose. Every time he looks at Maria, he is reminded that the greatest treasure isn't buried in a bank vault, but is found in the eyes of someone who truly knows you. He went looking for an escape and found a destination that changed the trajectory of his entire existence. Reflecting on his journey, he often thinks about the man he used to be and how empty that life seems in comparison to his current reality. He still visits the bustling cities for business, but his heart always remains in the quiet village by the sea. He encourages others in his position to step outside their comfort zones and see the world through a lens of empathy rather than profit. The story of the billionaire in the village is a testament to the power of human connection and the idea that love knows no economic boundaries. It serves as a reminder that underneath the clothes we wear and the houses we live in, we are all searching for the same sense of belonging. The village has flourished since the storm, with new opportunities for the youth and a stronger sense of security for the elderly. They don't treat him like a king, but like a neighbor who happened to have a very big secret. He still enjoys the simple meals and the sound of the ocean at night, which provide him with a peace that money could never buy. Maria continues to teach, reminding the children that their dreams are valid and that the world is much larger than the borders of their town. Together, they have created a legacy that will last much longer than any corporate empire he could have built alone.
In the end, the deception that started his journey became the foundation for a truth that set him free from the chains of his own making. He realized that pretending to be poor allowed him to see the world with a clarity that his wealth had previously obscured. It was only by losing his identity that he was able to find his soul and the woman who would walk beside him through it all. The man who had everything finally discovered that he had nothing until he met a woman in a small village who taught him how to love. Their life is a beautiful blend of two different worlds, united by a shared vision for a better and more compassionate future.
The sun sets over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the village that he now calls home. He sits on the porch with Maria, watching the children play, and he knows that he is exactly where he's supposed to be. The journey of 1,000 miles and $1 billion led him to a small wooden house and a heart full of gratitude. He is no longer the billionaire who pretended to be poor. He is a man who found his true wealth in the simplest of places. As the stars come out, he realizes that the greatest adventure of all is the one that brings you home to yourself.